My name is Mary Elizabeth Halper, the Associate Director of the Hertog Foundation. You'll get a chance to meet our director, Cheryl Miller, in just a few minutes when she introduces our guest speaker, Adam Kuiper. But for right now, I'm going to give you a quick interview of our winter program and talk a bit about our summer plans. If you have any questions, as Nico noted in the chat, if you have any questions either along the way or at the end, we'll have a quick Q&A session, and you can type your answers into the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And Cheryl will make sure that they get answered. Before we get started, we're going to announce the winners of our first raffle round. So please have your chat window open so you can respond to Nico if selected. I'm waiting for Nico now to tell me who those lucky winners are. You all can sit in suspense. All right, and here we are. The first two winners of our raffle are Daniel Parsons, who will win a copy of Greatness, Reagan Churchill and the Making of Extraordinary Leaders by Steve Hayward, and Emma Palmberg, who will win a copy of the Pulitzer Prize-winning novel Killer Angels by Michael Shara. As Nico said in the chat, you should get in touch with him so he can make sure that you actually get your prizes. Now on to our brief overview. So let's lay out some basics about our upcoming winter program. The course will consist of 4 independent courses, actually. The whole seminar series will consist of 4 independent courses on 4 political novels. Fellows who are going to be reading Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels with Ryan Hanley will meet on Monday evenings. Fellows reading Dostoevsky's Demons with Jacob Howland will meet on Tuesday evenings. Fellows reading Saul Bellows Ravelstein with Matthew Consonetti will meet on Wednesdays. And finally, fellows reading Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison with Thomas Merrill will be meeting on Thursdays. If you haven't already had a chance to take a look at what our faculty have to say about these particular works and about studying the humanities more generally, you can find their introductory videos on our Facebook and Twitter pages, or take a look at our YouTube. I think Nico will be sharing a link to those soon. Each seminar is going to consist of 5 weekly meetings. These meetings will take place over Zoom and will run for about 2 hours from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Please keep that time difference in mind when you're figuring out whether you can commit to a course. So if you're on the West Coast, obviously it's going to be a different time for you. If you're somewhere else in the world, please take that into consideration because we will demand that all students commit to every session. The seminars will start in the last week of December 2020 and they'll conclude the last week of January 2021. We're going to provide you with all of your course materials, both the novel as well as hard copies of any supplementary reading material that the instructor might wish for you to have. And you'll receive a $200 stipend upon completing all the program requirements. Those requirements include being present for every session, submitting a brief reflection paper for one of the sessions, and completing a course evaluation after the seminar concludes. So what does it take to apply? First thing to note is that you need to do it before December 1st, 2020. That's only about a dozen days away. But the good news is that the application itself is pretty straightforward. You can apply to all 4 seminars with one application, but if selected, you'll be selected for one course. It's unlikely that we'll actually offer multiple seminars to any given applicant. You will have an opportunity to rank your choices if you're interested in more than one course. And we do take your preference into account, although our priority, of course, is convening a cohort that's most likely to have excellent and lively discussions. Since we're reviewing admissions on a rolling basis, the sooner you get your application in, the greater your chances of being placed in your first choice course. And of course, the greater your chances of being selected at all. So even though we have the deadline on December 1st, do try to get in your applications as soon as you can. The application is available online on via our website. And we'll also, if you may have received an email from either me or Nico inviting you to apply, you can use the link in that email as well. And that link will actually already have some of your information pre-filled. In the application, we'll ask you to provide some basic personal information about yourself and your formal education. We'll also ask you to briefly state your interest in the program at large, as well as the specific courses that you're applying to. And I highly recommend drafting this statement, which should be about 200 words or so, to draft it in a separate Word document, proofread it, and then paste it into the application. I think it's gonna make your life a lot easier, and certainly it's more pleasant for us when we have to read them. We'll also ask you to provide contact information for a reference. This should be someone who can speak to your aptitude for the program, so someone who's seen you in intellectual action, like a professor or a mentor or a boss. We'll also need an unofficial transcript if you're a current student, and a copy of your CV or resume. We are not requiring a formal letter of recommendation. So even though we ask for contact information for your reference, we will be the ones to contact them if we need that additional information. We're not going to ask them to submit a formal letter on your behalf, and therefore you don't have to ask them to submit a formal letter on your behalf. You'll also have the opportunity to indicate whether you're interested in our summer 2021 programs, which I'm going to talk about in a few moments. Please note that you will be asked to submit a distinct application for those programs. The summer application is likely to be more involved than this application. And I do want to say that your application to the winter program will have no formal bearing on your application to the summer program. That is, submitting an application to the winter program will neither help nor hurt the chances of your summer application. If you do get accepted to the winter program, however, we will, of course, take into account the quality of your participation when we reassess you for our summer program. So if you get in, make sure that you impress us. If you make it to the finalist round, then Nico will contact you to schedule an interview with myself or Cheryl. And these interviews usually take about 30 minutes or so. And we get into some of the details of your application and ask you very difficult questions. Not too difficult, but it's a chance for us to get to know you better so we can make a more informed decision. So I mentioned the summer 2021. What's going on with our summer programs? First, some definitive good news. Applications for the War Studies Summer Fellowship are opening later this month. So that's great. You'll have a chance to apply very soon for that program. All of our other summer programs will be announced in January 2021. That's our long-term political studies program, as well as our shorter-term summer courses. We'll announce those in the new year. War Studies already has two plans in place, actually, either for an in-person residential program in DC or a virtual program. We are hoping that we will be able to offer our other summer programs in person, but of course, we do need more clarity about the trajectory of the pandemic before we can make that decision prudently. The deadline for our summer 2021 programs will of course reflect this delay, so we'll make sure that you have enough time, and we'll give you enough heads up about that so you can get a solid application in. And to close, before we turn to our Q&A, I'd like to tell you a little bit about our Alumni Network. In addition to the inestimable experience of talking about these great works with our wise teachers and your excellent, enthusiastic peers, you'll also become a part of our Hertog Alumni Network, which consists of over 1,200 alumni all across the US and all around the world. Our alumni work in a variety of fields, but concentrations of our alumni work in academia, law, and politics, policy, national security. As part of our alumni network, you'll receive a weekly newsletter that lists jobs, internships, and other fellowship opportunities. It'll also list academic conferences, virtual events, and a very, if I do say so myself, a nicely curated list of things to read and watch that we really think you'd find interesting. You'll also get a chance to see what other alumni are writing about, and if you have a piece published, we are happy to showcase that as well. You'll also be given access to our Hertog ambassadors. These are Hertog alumni in various professions: national security, law, policy, politics, journalism, the academy, who are already well on their way to a successful career. These ambassadors will be available to give advice and direction upon request. Well, that concludes our overview, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Again, please use the Q&A function in the Zoom toolbar to type out your question, and Cheryl is going to join me on screen here, and she will ask your questions for you. But I think before we get to that, we have 2 more winners for our raffle. And it looks like we have Sebastian Rodriguez and Jenna Brister. You two have won a copy of What So Proudly We Hail, a compendium of American soul and story, speech, and song, edited by Leon and Amy Cass, as well as Diana Schaub. Congratulations, you two. All right, now to your questions.
Excellent. Hey, Mary Elizabeth. So first question from Andreas Hammer, and he's asking about how many fellows are in each group. An excellent question. How many fellows per class?
Very good. We will have a maximum of 15 fellows in each seminar. We found that it is possible to preserve the heart of a really good seminar discussion online, but a key feature of that is that we have to keep it small. So we might be able to have a really good discussion in person with about 20 or so, but we find that more than 15, it becomes just too unwieldy to have a really genuine sparking conversation. So maximum of 15.
Excellent. And then we have a question from Kaylin Elliott. Should our 200-word application essay address every course we apply to, or just the course we're most interested in?
You should try to balance between saying more generally why you're interested in the program, and then we really do like to hear specific reasons why the courses that you've chosen first is the one that you're most interested in. If your first and second are pretty close in terms of your desirability, it's a good idea to mention that the second one, again, since we're filling these spots on a rolling basis, a course might be filled that was your first choice. And so it is a good idea, it might be savvy to state why the second choice is also high up on your priority list.
All right, and we have a question from Joel Bassans. With regards to providing a reference, are Hertog alumni acceptable, or would the foundation prefer someone with no affiliation to it?
We take our recommendations from our alumni very seriously. In fact, a number of the nominations that we receive are from alumni. We always ask, once you become an alumni, we'll ask you to send us students that you think will be likely to benefit and fit the program. So that is a good idea. I think it's a bit better to have someone who's in a more professional capacity, either a professor or a mentor or boss, to be your reference, but we certainly don't look down on having alumni say nice things about our applicants.
Absolutely. For some, definitely a professor. I think we're a little bit more stringent for this program, and also it's covering a wider group of potential candidates, so young professionals, gap year students, and so on, where you might not have a professor or supervisor readily handy as a reference. And so in that case, a Hertog alumni would be great. Erica Daly, should this reference be the same person who nominated us, or would you prefer a different person?
On a similar principle with the alumni, if they've nominated you, that means that they both know us and they know you. So I think that's a perfectly acceptable reference. That's an excellent way to proceed.
Yeah, and we love our nominators, and so when we see their names, we are happy, and we also know that they know us so well that they have a very good idea of who is a good fit for our program. So it is a plus, not a minus. Now a question from Claire McCulloch. I know I'm mingling your last name. I'm sorry, Claire. If you were recommended by 2 people, can you provide the contact for both?
I believe in this current application, you're going to have to make King Solomon decision, and you're gonna have to pick one. So pick the one that you think has a better insight into who you are and the kind of student you are and your interests. But I think there's only one field, so I'm afraid you're gonna have to make a tough decision.
Yeah, and if you know you have 2 nominators who are close to our heart, if you become a finalist, you can always talk about them. We all love to hear that as well. We'll talk to you a little bit about why you're interested in the program. And often students will say, well, I had a professor and then I had a friend who was an alum who I really respect. Tell me how great this program was, and that's why I applied. And we like to hear that.
You also do have an opportunity to elaborate on how you heard about the Hertog Foundation. And so there you can mention the multiple points of contact that you might have with the foundation. And you can mention both of those nominators in that field in the application.
Great. And we have a question from Max Minkius. To clarify, it sounds like we do not need to ask our recommender to write a letter, just to give contact information.
Exactly. You might put them on notice that you're giving us their information, but you do not have to ask them to write a letter. We will not ask them to write a letter. At the very most, we'll ask them a quick question, ask them to give 2 cents on you, but we will not be asking for any formal letters. So it's not a terribly big commitment for your professors, and we understand it's a unique school year, so we didn't want to overtax them.
Yeah. So that might change for the summer. We haven't decided yet. We realized it's a really weird semester, and it's going to be harder to get those letters of recommendation than it already usually is. And so we're going to take that into account when we create the application coming for this summer. All right, question from Catherine Wickerberg. If you've already applied to the winter program, what is the estimated time to hear back?
So because we're doing a rolling admissions basis, we can't give a precise date for when anyone would be hearing back. We are processing, we're reviewing the applications as they come in, we're setting up interviews. Some of you in the audience may have already been interviewed, and we'll be letting people know as we review those applications and as we have those interviews. Cheryl, do you have an idea of when everyone should have heard from us by?
Well, so deadline is by December 1st. It kind of depends on what happens December 1st. If you all wait until midnight, which would be sad, send your applications in now and save us the onslaught. It also increases your chances. But I think, this program starts the last week of December, and we want to get everyone their books and get them started. So I would hope by the second week of December, we would have processed all the applications.
Great, and that gives me an opportunity to say something that I neglected to say earlier, which is we are going to try to get you your books as soon as we accept you into the program, with the idea, with the hope that you'll have the chance to read them in their entirety before you actually sit down for the seminar. They're spaced out by a week, but with novels, of course, the scope of them and the fact that their wholes and parts are a little bit different than, say, a political treatise or an article on a policy. It's really a good idea to have a sense of that whole before you start trying to analyze the parts. So we highly encourage you, once you get your book, to dive right in if at all possible.
Yeah. Eli Cronin asks, so to clarify, the deadline for the summer program is not December 1st.
That is correct. We do not have a summer program to apply to at the moment. We will be getting you that information soon. The December 1st deadline is exclusively for our winter program.
Yes. Abdullah Almeri asks, if you are nominated by a professor, do you still have to apply?
Yes. If you were nominated by a professor, you should have received an email from me informing you that you were nominated and humbly asking you to apply. I think I used some exclamation points. And that link in the email is a personalized link for your application, and I highly recommend that you use it. If you don't use it, you will not be on our radar, and you won't be considered for the program. So you definitely have to apply if you want to be considered for acceptance to the program.
And it's a really simple application, so there's no reason not to do it. It's very easy. A 200-word statement, a letter of recommendation, or no letter of recommendation, just a reference. It's super easy. You can do it. All right, Devin Humphreys, if we're going to be in 2 different locations in these coming months, what date should we use for where we should have our material sent? Devin, we'll connect with you offline on that. Nico will make sure that when we send your materials, we get it to the right place.
Yes, and of the information that you provided in your application, we do ask you for your address. We will confirm that address before we try to ship you anything. So if you are going to be moving even unexpectedly, we will have a chance to make sure that we're actually getting you your books.
All right, and we have a question from Prabodha Parikala, who is a alum of Hertog. So hello, Prabodha. And she asks, could you go into more depth on why Hertog chose to cover political novels for this winter session and why these specific novels were chosen?
So the short answer is because our wonderful founder and president really wanted to have a course on novels. The longer answer is, even though the Hertog Foundation has previously offered courses on literature, we've had some wonderful courses on Shakespeare's plays. We did Sophocles' Antigone this last summer. It's really difficult to have a course on a novel that takes place in such a concentrated parameter of time. So usually our courses are 1 week. when they were online this summer, they were spaced out over 2 weeks, but that's still a lot to get through. And because of the scope that I mentioned before, the reason that I'm asking you guys to try to read the novels before you actually come into the seminar, for that reason, the way that we've structured this program, spaced out over 5 weeks, you have time to sit and reflect, you have time to review. We really think that's actually very conducive to reading the novels well and having fantastic discussions about them. So in other words, we're taking advantage of all the advantages that this move to online offers, trying to make sure that we bring some goodness out of what's been happening. So that's why we decided to pursue novels. Mr. Hertog really wanted to, but also it really worked out pretty well fantastically with the situation that we have to deal with.
Yeah, and in terms of why these specific novels, so we were kind of inspired by this great book, which I'll chat you guys in just a moment, or maybe Nico can chat it for me. It's by Irving Howe, and it's called The Political Novel. And so it is an investigation of political themes and philosophic themes and some really great works, including Dostoevsky's Demons. And I knew that I wanted to start it with Dostoevsky. If you have been interviewed for a Hertog program, you know one of the questions we ask, and this is a spoiler, so if you are about to be interviewed, you can prepare and should prepare. We ask about a book that's influenced you and the way that you think. And, you know, this being a Hertog program, there are some standard answers: The Republic, which makes Mary Elizabeth very happy, Aristotle's Politics or Ethics, Tocqueville, we hear that a lot. And then if there's a novelist that a student names, it's always Dostoevsky, almost always. And so that obviously tells us there's a market here. And so, you know, we thought, what should we do? Everyone typically reads Crime and Punishment. A lot of people have read The Brothers K, but The Demons isn't really taught that often, but it's a really wonderful novel. It obviously has some contemporary resonance at the current moment. And so it made a lot of sense. And then after that, we were kind of thinking about what 3 things go along with it. And so part of that was just talking to our really wonderful faculty about what they wanted to teach. And so Ryan Hanley immediately volunteered to do Gulliver's Travel. He is an amazing professor. And so, you know, whatever he wanted to do, I was going to be on board with. And then similar for The Invisible Man, which another novel right now that has a lot of contemporary resonance. And Tom Merrill is getting, American University is gearing up to teach it for a politics and literature class he had. So we wanted to capitalize on that opportunity. So we also thought that this would just be a kind of fun way to use this downtime that we all seem to have thanks to the pandemic, and something that engages the emotions, that tells a story. This seems like a good time for that kind of exercise. All right, I think we've got Jameson Hearn, one last question. If there is a summer program, does the foundation plan on considering recent graduates of this coming spring semester? Yes, absolutely. And Jameson, there will be a summer program in some form or fashion, no matter what. The question is, what's it going to look like? Is it going to be in person or is it going to be online? And if it's online versus in person, I think it's going to take a different shape than what we normally do, because we're going to want to make it a good experience for you where you all don't get Zoom fatigue and go out of your minds because we're like on the computer 24/7. So we're going to think about that and develop a program that makes sense to offer online for the summer if that's the circumstances that we find ourselves in. We want to avoid as much as possible. I know a lot of people had the very unfortunate bait and switch scenario where your university said, we're going to be in person. And then you got there and they were like, no, never mind, you were actually not. It obviously is a really tough situation, so we sympathize. But we want to avoid that as much as possible. So I don't want to tell you that we're going to do an in-person program when I know that under the current circumstances, we couldn't have an in-person program. So we want to be honest and upfront about that. And that's part of the reason that we're pushing back till January.
I see in the chat from Chloe Baker that is asking about the dates of the winter program. It's a little bit tricky to say because each course meets on a different day, but the program as a whole opens on December 28th. So that's the first week of classes. So I believe we have Gulliver's Travels first thing on December 28th. And then on December 29th will be the first course of the first session for Dust As Keats Demons. December 30th will be the first session for Stahlbel's Ravelstein. And then lucky you, all of you who get into Invisible Man, your first session will be on New Year's Eve, but early enough in the evening that you can still celebrate. So don't worry about that. And then you'll continue on those same weekdays for 5 weeks, concluding at the end of January.
What a better way to ring in the new year than reading and talking about a great book. All of these details are also at the link that I just emailed, or I chatted to everyone, hertogfoundation.org/program/humanities. So you can see the specific dates. Again, it's between 6 and 8 p.m. Eastern time. So you want to think about that as well in terms of the time commitment. Zoom makes it possible for all of us to meet from disparate places, but at the same time, we still do occupy like a certain place in time and space. So 6 o'clock here may be midnight there. And so that's something for you to take into account.
Great.
All right.
I think we have just one last quick question,
okay.
and it's a good one. I want to make sure we get it, and I think Mr. Kuiper is waiting in the wings, but I do want to address this question. Jenna Brister asks about what the course evaluation is. That's an opportunity for us to hear from you after you've taken the course about how it went, what you learned, what you took away from it, what ways we can improve the program. We take these course evaluations very seriously. Cheryl and I pore over them after every program, and we really appreciate your thoughtful and measured, but we accept criticism happily, especially if it's something that we can do something about. So the evaluation is fairly involved. We do ask you to reflect on the course and how it worked. And these are even more important for us now as we're dealing with different formations of these online courses. So it'll be a little bit of a time commitment. I think we usually recommend setting aside about half an hour to fill it. And that's where you also can recommend other students for any of our other programs.